As elsewhere in the Arabian Peninsula, which the Romans called Happy Arabia, Oman has seen decades of prosperity thanks to oil revenues. Muscat, the capital of the Sultanate, seems to be dozing among the hills. Where are the skyscrapers and glass towers of the other capitals in the Gulf? Oman is no Dubai. His Majesty Sultan Qaboos prefers his country to develop at a moderate pace rather than at breakneck speed. From Muscat, I set off on the trail of Sinbad the sailor. He sought adventure, glory and fortune on the Indian Ocean. But I'll be traveling overland, along the coastline which he sailed around. Then I'll cross into Yemen to visit Sana'a and mythical Aden. The Bedouins of Arabia have swapped their tents for hypermarkets. Is it because they knew how to live so elegantly in the desert that they look so at ease in these air-conditioned boutiques? Shopping is the new watchword for these former nomads who are converts to modernity. Even Islamic law, which requires the wearing of the veil, can adapt to the rules of consumer society.
In some families, we're allowed to dress in the European style. I like to mix the two styles, Western and Eastern. I go out with or without my veil, the abaya or overgarment. Today I've come out without the abaya. But when we go to the villages in the country, we have to wear it. We know we must wear it in rural areas. In the capital, Muscat, you often see girls in jeans, dressed in a very modern and stylish way. But they wear the abaya over the top of everything. In fact, there are no rules. Even wearing the abaya responds to fashion.
One thing that distinguishes Oman from the other Gulf countries is the relatively better position of women. A member of the Omanis Women's Association tries to convince me that Oman is an island of liberalism.
Praise be to God and glory to His Majesty, Sultan Qaboos bin Saeed the Glorious. May Allah grant long life to the Sultan of Oman, who has encouraged women to gain their place in society. The Sultan included women's rights in the constitution. Our status in Oman gives us equality with men. Women in Oman are distinguished and intelligent. They hold high-level posts. Thanks be to God, we have 3 female ministers in our government. To defend the interests of businesswomen, we have a Chamber of Commerce assigned to us, as well as an Economic Council of Women.
I wonder how much truth there is behind this speech, which seems somewhat rehearsed. I don't linger in the port as I still have a long way to go. The spirit of Scheherazade is like the smoke of frankincense, just as bewitching, just as elusive. I mustn't waste any more time. I already feel I've stayed too long in this city, sleeping under its ancient laurel trees. In the past, you cast off from Muscat and took to the high seas. But I'm turning my back on the waves and heading for Sur, more than 300 kilometers away. In Oman, crossing the mountains is like attacking a fortress. You have to slip through the cracks in the ramparts. My route takes me via the Samail Gap, a gorge through the bastion of Jebel Akhtar. The twists and turns eventually lead to what I'm here for, places where the spirit of the world breathes. Perched on a rocky outcrop over the void, I think about the men who balanced their villages stone by stone on these rocky peaks to decorate the mountain with hanging gardens. The oasis of Birkat al-Maus prospers in the cool of the palm trees. Created from the fragile resources of a wadi by the desert people's genius for gardening, the oasis is an ode to life, whispered by the palm trees to the fruitful earth. We're approaching the desert. The mighty mountains are giving way to the sands. At first, I think it's a vision from ancient times, when merchants led their caravan of camels loaded with gems and frankincense across the Wahiba sands. But I soon realized that these young animals with their strange muzzles are in training for the Bedouins' favorite sport, camel racing. Tomorrow, these youngsters will be in competition against those of other camel breeders who've come from all over the desert, like Abdullah, a trainer who's invited me to his camp. He tells me that in the old days, the camel jockeys were children. Even the most popular traditions have to change with the march of progress.
Last year, a boy fell off and seriously injured his back. Now he's paralyzed. It's happened often. The robot has solved the problem. No more danger. The robot is placed on the camel's back, and the whip works using this radio control. We follow the camels in cars beside the racetrack, and when we need to use the whip, we press the button.
At dawn, everything is in place for the festivities. Some of the breeders have traveled all night to get here. The camels are harnessed, the robots have been switched on, and the men wait impatiently from the signal from Abdullah, the race chief, to let their camels go. The location of the race was kept secret until last night. I was only told a few hours ago. I was also made to understand that some of the competitors don't like Westerners watching camel races. These meetings are almost clandestine affairs. Islam forbids games of chance and the betting of money. Will the veil of dust be thick enough to hide the men's misdemeanors from the eyes of heaven? Now I'm starting to stamp my feet like the camels. I'm impatient to see them cover the 1.5 kilometers that separates them from the finishing line. There are 10 races throughout the morning. The stakes in these competitions are high. The fastest camels will go on to race before the emirs of Dubai. The rest will end their career on a butcher's slab. The owners dream of international futures. The winners leave covered in prizes. And the audience has a taste of forbidden fruit.
This camel won the first prize. That's a brand new car. I've been offered 7,000 rial. That's 13,500 euros. But I don't want to sell. It's my camel. I trained it myself.
The red sands of the Wahiba stretch like velvet to the sea. I'm making for the southeastern coast for another kind of adventure. These carpenters are practicing a construction technique that is dying. From here in Sur sailed the ships that were the glory of the Arabian fleet. Dhows and sambuks hoisted their triangular sails to conquer the seas up to the limits of the known world. but it's a long time since Sinbad and his companions cast off for the distant and dangerous waters. Today, the boatyard in Sur is the last in the country to keep this seafaring heritage alive, and produces a few wooden dhows for sale to wealthy fans of naval nostalgia. But in Oman, it's not just the sailors who answer the call of the sea. "50 kilometers south of Sur, green turtles crawl awkwardly on the beaches of Ras Al Yin's nature reserve. After traveling thousands of kilometers across the world's oceans, they come to lay their eggs in the exact same place where they were born. Only 3 out of 1,000 hatchlings will reach adulthood. Foxes, crabs, fish and seabirds are their unrelenting predators. This morning, the seagull Luftwaffe is dive-bombing the turtle navy. The indifferent sun casts a golden glow over the site of the massacre, a reminder that we must continue this sad and beautiful game called life. But as Scheherazade says in 1001 Nights, the dawn is coming and it's time to pause in our story. Further south at the port of Sarab, Sinbad the sailor wouldn't recognize the Sultanate of Oman, where he experienced so many battles and so much prosperity. Since then, oil has gushed to the surface of Bedouin Arabia. Modernity has done its work. Only the hulls of the fishermen's tahaus bring back the Sultanate to the time of the 1001 Nights. Today's fishermen, like their ancestors, are doing their best to empty the ocean of its harvest. They sail their ships from Zanzibar to Ceylon, where the heroic history of the Arabian fleet was written. In the era of globalization, neither the sailors nor the vessels are originally from the Sultanate. The sailors come from the Indian Peninsula and the boats from the Emirates. In the age of the electronic chip, they need neither wind nor stars to make their way at sea. And no one regrets the passing of the astrolabe.
We don't use sails anymore. No more hauling on the sheets. Thank God we're in a modern age. We have machines that have replaced our tools. Even to locate the fish, we use the computer. Grace be to Allah.
The wood for the dhows came from Sur, but then fiberglass replaced everything in the boatyards. The age of wooden boats belongs to the past. The world has modernized, and so have boats. The structure of the hulls is the same, but they're molded in fiberglass. Generally, our boats are made in Dubai.
What has really changed on Sinbad's ocean are the crew members. A quick lesson on globalization from the bridge of a fiberglass dhow.
My men are from Bangladesh. In the old days, the Omanis did all the hard work. These days, the Omanis, frankly, are tired. Really tired. Also, they want more money. But a man can only pay what he can pay.
I share a fish curry with Murad, the owner. But the whole Sea of Oman can't temper the heat of the spices. I spend some time thinking about the labor of these Bengalis and their effects on our shrinking planet. These migrant workers emptying the Sea of Oman for a few rials more are the new global proletariat. They've left hardship behind to aspire to slightly better lives, thousands of kilometers from home. I continue my journey on land in the Wahiba Sands. I'm heading for the province of Dhofar, a kingdom of arid mountains scattered with wild wadis. I'm told that the people who live there are free and haven't quite lost their taste for independence. I'm drawing nearer to Yemen. Soon I'll reach the border and travel down the pirate coast to the heart of the kingdom of Sheba. But for the moment, I must swallow the traveler's cocktail, a mixture of sand, road and emptiness, washed down with endless time. It's not cerebral dehydration that's making me run over the dunes, it's a kind of fever. Like Lawrence of Arabia, I've caught the fever of vast, open space. But this is not the time for broken dreams or empty gestures. Make way for serious matters. The spread of tarmac, the pumping of gas, oil exploration. Rebellion never filled the barrels. Today, Oman draws 50% of its GDP from its oil fields. What would Lawrence have done in a world with taps? Even the camels no longer have a place. 100 kilometers from Sana'a in the Dhofar Mountains, merchants of old loaded the precious frankincense onto camels to distribute it to the four winds of the east. Today, a few tenacious old men like Sylvain al-Amari refuse to forget the age-old method of collecting frankincense on the slopes of the wadis.
Before the time of Sultan Qaboos, the current sultan, the economy of the region relied on the boswellia tree and olibanum oil. But then the Omanis turned towards the sea and maritime trade. They started fishing for lobsters, catching fish in nets, and everyone left the oil to earn their living from the sea. Today, fish stocks are getting low. If one day they run out, we'll see people return to the boswellia tree. For me, this tree represents real wealth, the only real wealth to my eyes.
This source of riches, born of the earth and brought through the sap to the open air, flowed for centuries along the mythical incense route. Through the lands of the Queen of Sheba as far as the Athenian Republic. Did the frankincense burnt at the manger of the Nativity come from Dhofar? Once the sap is dried, sorted and mixed with various oils, it will be made into the smoke-producing powder. In the market of Sana'a, veiled Bedouin women tend their stalls, selling incense to tourists. Farida explains how the odalisques impregnated their silks with the smoke to make their secret meetings in the shade of the Mashrabiyah even more heady. The real odor of frankincense has always been that of money. Frankincense is the noblest way of making your fortune go up in smoke. The light is fading. Tomorrow, I'll be in Yemen. From Sana'a to the border stretch 200 kilometers of road squeezed between the mountains and the coast. In the 1970s, the communists of the Dhofar Liberation Front tried for partition. Sultan Qaboos put down the rebellion, and now only the memory remains. The border. War raged here until reunification in the 1990s between North Yemen and South Yemen. My first impression is that the scenery is identical to the country I've just left. Same road, same horizon. But in the atmosphere there's a hint of wilderness and anarchy that I will come to understand as the essence of the country. Al-Mukalla at last, a maritime city of trade and commerce. You can't tell whether the buildings have tumbled down from the mountains or whether they're climbing up to attack. The travel gods are kind, and the first person I speak to in Al-Mukalla is a poet. Ahmed Syed Bousaba won the award for best writer in the country.
A man cannot only be a poet. He must live in the order of the spirit as much as in the order of action. He can, for example, write verses while working as a fisherman, a teacher or a sportsman. He can put the same vigor into all of these activities.
When I ask Ahmed Syed what it was about his country that inspires him, his answer includes heaven, earth, the soul and the spirits. He tells me it is essential to be from somewhere.
Love of one's country is part of the faith. The revealed religions urge man to love the land of his birth. Each person must feel and show his affection for the place he comes from, the land that saw his birth. O my country, to you my love and my rhymes, to you my preference and my inclination, O my country. This is the way to address your country with affection, by considering that everything there is beautiful. It's normal to love your country. You drink its water. You eat there. You are clothed there. You live well.
Muses and muezzins sit happily side by side here. The 5 daily calls to prayer and the presence of Allah in every detail of existence have not subdued Ahmed Said's inspiration. Our meeting in Al-Mukalla bodes well for my stay in Yemen. When traveling, it's better to drive than to step on your shoelaces. The monotony of the road is sometimes broken by a police checkpost.
Are these journalists?
Yes, they're journalists.
Have you your papers, the stamps? Do you want an escort to the next checkpoint?
No, thank you. There's no room in the car.
Okay, go ahead. You're very welcome.
The police seem to be pretty easygoing here. When I reach the edge of Wadi Doan, in the middle of Hadramaut, I know that I've reached one of those special places where man's effort are merely a continuation of the work of nature. Behind these imposing walls and towers lives a population of believers whose lives are regulated by prayer. Even the smallest village is a garrison guarded by monks. The canyon of Wadi Doan awaits. In these crumbling rocks, the people of the Kingdom of Sheba recognized a landscape which could protect them from the turmoil of history. Transforming these hostile wadis into welcoming oases, they built villages which nestle at the foot of the hills and so turned the canyons into impregnable strongholds. I'll spend 10 days in this giant labyrinth. The villages themselves imitate the architecture of the canyons. Here in Buda, the streets wind like wadis, facades rise up like cliff faces, and the roofs emulate the rocky peaks. In Hadramaut, survival depends on water management. Without the water diviners, these villages would die. Omar Salem is the guardian of the village spring and takes me to the reservoir of pure water which he looks after. It's the first time I've ever been down to the cellar for drinking water.
We haven't had a drought for 10 years, thanks to the storage we have built upstream. In case of a shortage, we can resort to this stream. When Allah the Merciful sends us rain, we don't draw water from here. We leave it to refill. Anyway, the well is never ending. When you draw it, the water flows back immediately. And there's open access to the spring. Everyone from the village can come.
And so, by the double grace of Allah and underground streams, heaven and earth, if you like, the Yemeni people have prospered in these arid areas. In each oasis, the barada, or water fountains, provide an opportunity for refreshment, and especially for meeting people. Mohammed Monassa, the village papermaker and an expert in the water laws, soon invites me to take the next class at his house.
In the legislation on water, the rules are recognised and accepted by everyone. The regulations are in a register held by a wise man in the valley. The rules governing irrigation and the sharing of water resources are in this book, kept by the Sheikh of Al Masana, so he has an overview of the irrigation system for the whole valley. These rules are always applied, but the problem is, the cultivated land is being abandoned. Owners are emigrating and young people are leaving. The young find the harshness of the life here hard to bear. They prefer to leave and go abroad.
I make a detour to Ribat Ba'ashan, the neighbouring village, to see the birthplace of one of the world's most famous men. Nothing marks it out from the other villages, except perhaps from the symbol of the Islamic Party. This hamlet is said to be the birthplace of a son. My dream would be to cross the country from east to west and approach Sana'a by way of the great central erg, antechamber to the mythical desert of deserts. In Yemen, they drive at breakneck speed with knife in hand. The permit I need from the authorities will never arrive. In Yemen, a tribal country, the political situation is still turbulent. The government doesn't really like foreigners traveling freely in the interior, where the capital's authority is just a distant echo. At the crossroads of the inland highway, where Somalis, Arabs and Bedouins live side by side in a glorious melting pot, I decide it's time to rest and take stock. The roadside inns are valuable places to the traveller. Away from the hustle and bustle, you can rest and think before setting off again to where your heart takes you. I decide to make for the city of Shibam, at the end of the Wadi Hadramaut. Then I will have to take a plane to Sana'a. I enter the city by the west gate. I'm keen to solve the mystery of these citadels made of rammed earth, which sprang up 10 centuries ago with all the characteristics of urban sophistication. What made the desert dwellers decide to settle here and create high-rise buildings well before the modern age of the skyscraper? A city made of mud is an organic, living thing which changes with age and can eventually fall apart. It requires constant care from the people who live there, as the slightest crack must be filled as soon as it appears. In the streets of Shibam, not a day goes by without work starting on the facade of a house.
Before I moved into my uncle's house, I had to repair the roof. It was in a bad state and threatened the whole building. A few months ago, there were heavy rains, and the windows at the top and the bottom were damaged. Now I've called in craftsmen to replace them for me. The German NGO GTZ is helping us in the restoration work. They spare no effort to help us in the permanent struggle, and we thank them for their solicitude.
The NGO mentioned by the owner of the house is run by Thomas Lehrmann, a German architect. Since coming to visit the city of rammed earth, he has never left and has now converted to Islam. He now dedicates his life to safeguarding Shibam, the gigantic marvel with feet of clay.
The initiative must come from the local. He must be willing and able to renovate his house and also to do what he can, according to his financial possibilities. Our main focus is we want to keep the city a living place, so not an artificial tourist site which is left by locals. You cannot adapt solutions from outside because there is no other place like Shibam. So we have to listen to the people, to the locals, to the experience of how it was done traditionally in this city, but we have to face some modernization challenges. For example, hygienic conditions change, social expectations living standards change somehow, so we have to follow this process in a way that what is required to keep this city a living city and preservation is somehow balanced to each other.
The Germans of Shibam have succeeded not only in restoring the mud walls, but also in re-cementing the life of the community. They've revitalized the economy by giving work to people who would otherwise have left the city. This brickyard was set up 10 years ago, not far from the city's ramparts. I can't help wondering if the energy of these men is transferred to the mud as they work it, and if it's that which radiates so strongly from the walls of Shibam. All the travel guides use the same cliché and describe Shibam as the Manhattan of the desert. Gazing for the last time at this anomaly of architecture and history, I decide that it would be more accurate to call New York the Shibam of glass. At Sayoun Airport, not far from Shibam, I hop on a plane to Sana'a. I take the government's lead in dealing with the thorny tribal question and decide to avoid it altogether. There aren't many such cities on Earth. Venice, New York, Valparaiso perhaps. As soon as you arrive, you'll wonder how you'll ever be able to leave. I understand why Pasolini declared Sana'a to be the most beautiful city in the world. As the men head for the mosque, I answer the call of souk and set off to explore. Those who aren't praying crowd around the golden calf. As night falls, the market in Old Sana'a, one of the biggest in the Arabian Peninsula, is in full swing. And I know just what I'm looking for. A jambaya shop. These daggers, worn by the men of Yemen, have aroused my curiosity.
Here in Yemen, a man is judged by his jambia. When you visit people, they don't look first at your face or your clothes. They look to your belt to inspect your jambia. They immediately know about your origins and status. A Yemeni proverb says, if you ask your brother for help, he might not come, but the jambia will always be there. The jambia is also a weapon of peace. It can resolve many conflicts peacefully. It offers both guarantee and remedy. If two people from different tribes have a dispute to resolve, they must hand over their jambia as security. No hostile action can be taken while the jambia is held by the other person. If one party doesn't accept the judgment, the truce is broken by selling the knife, thus dishonoring the man.
What terrible jambaya has pierced the clouds gathering in the twilight? A monsoon-like rain falls on the city. But it takes more than a downpour to stop the people of the dagger going about their business. Beneath the apparent anarchy, the life of the souk is strictly regulated. The market is divided into kingdoms, or guilds. My passion for knives leads me to the section reserved for the people I admire the most, blacksmiths. Masters of iron and fire, holders of the most ancient secret, they continue to hammer out on their anvils the tune that inspired the first of them 5,000 years ago. Fire, smoke, water and iron. the elements come together in an alchemist's dream. Near the gate of Bab al-Yemen, I happen to meet Sheikh Abdul Malik al-Kabat. Every day, escorted by his henchmen, this neighborhood chief walks around his territory, keeping an eye on his charges, ready to receive complaints and requests. This man guarantees the peace of old Sana'a.
We are joined to the city. The flesh of the residents and the old stones are mixed together. This feeling of being one contributes to the beauty of this city. Everyone feels it, and that's why they love our town. May God preserve Sana'a in this form forever. May God preserve Sana'a in this form forever. May God preserve Sana'a in this form forever. We are prepared to protect it as we protect our souls. We protect that cement, breeze blocks and iron don't take over. We wish for Sana'a to remain clothed in brick and stone, and that it will never lose its golden color. That is really my dearest wish. Let's hope that our sons safeguard it when we are no longer here. It's a treasure, a living museum. You can't take a step without stumbling on a sign of the past.
May heaven grant the wish of Sheikh al-Kabat, and may Sana'a find the strength to stay as it is, an island of beauty lashed by the waves of modernity. The gardens of Sana'a are wells of coolness, clearings in the forest of stone. These plots belong to the garden of Al-Madrasa. In the middle of the city, they are tended by 5 or 6 families. For the traveler, it's a delight to stop in these havens, tended by women and children. Outside is the bustle of the old market, and here, the peace of the kitchen garden. I've heard of Sheikh Ahmed Saleh Douay. If anyone in Yemen knows the subtleties of tribal law, he does. This dignitary of the Baki Hill tribe is a wise man, a sort of St. Louis without his oak. Every morning he listens to anyone who has a grievance and hands out justice according to the ways and customs of the Bedouin. Here, using your elbows will help.
The tribes of Yemen are very different. They all have their peculiarities with distinct legal customs. The tribes don't need state laws to settle their differences. They always try to settle disputes amicably. The central power tries to impose itself, but tribal law is holding out. I would even say that it's prevailing. It makes conciliation easier. And above all, agreement is reached much more rapidly.
I want a salary.
What do you want?
Find a solution.
What? No, it's not possible at the moment. There is no solution. I swear that we haven't any money. This year they didn't give us anything. The budget is blocked at the finance ministry. Some want a salary. Some want to become a sheikh. Some need to renew their sheikh's card. Some want arbitration in a dispute. That's the barrage of daily problems that I have to resolve. The document must be stamped. It only works if it's stamped. That's enough. Go away. In the state courts, the ones governed by Sharia law, or in the other criminal courts, our tribal customs have no legal validity. State law lays down strict punishments for every crime, but so do we. Our laws are sometimes even more strict. Take the case of murder. If you kill someone, a peaceful citizen on a journey, for example, the punishment under tribal law will be merciless. The criminal is executed, but before he dies, he will have to pay heavy fines.
So, the country's justice system depends on a careful balance between modern institutions and used to being out of step with the times. And there are other habits that the Yemenis will never give up. Like using kat, a plant they say heals the body and sets the mind free. Every day, nearly a third of Yemen's 22 million inhabitants go in search of cat. It's a matter of finding the best plant at the best price. The government won't ban consumption of this leaf, which has a similar effect on vodka. The WHO has classified the plant as a psychoactive substance, and as a result, cameras are never welcome in cat markets. Is that the plant of the angels or of the devil? No Yemeni would speak against the sacred leaf. I'm invited by musician Yahi Al-Afaj to share a cat session with his friends in the privacy of his diwan, the meeting room assigned for the art of chewing. Watching these men in white gently chewing the delicate shoots to the sound of the oud doesn't make cat look too bad. Chewing cat means taking your time. Time to dissolve the leaves in the cheek. Time to macerate the fibers. Time to let your soul come to the surface and for memories to appear in your mind.
For many people, it's a real passion. Some people chew cat every day, and some do it occasionally, on Thursday and Friday.
This privileged time only exists in Yemen. When we get together in the Magyar, we can talk about everything. Solve problems, arrange to celebrate our children's engagements or marriages. It's the ideal place to discuss all these domestic matters. It's also the perfect place for music, poetry, or literature. At each Magyar, we have a precise topic that we develop in the session.
It's hard to criticize a practice rooted in the time of the Queen of Sheba, which brings gentleness to the eyes of warriors. But it's also hard to ignore the fact that cat uses 25% of the country's water reserves, and its addictiveness is hindering the country's progress.
When we were little, our parents didn't let us chew cat. Even as young adults, we weren't allowed. It was only at the age of 40 that we could try it. These days, children of 7 or 9 try to get hold of cat. I say that's a bad habit. For a child, cat is harmful. For an adult, it's beneficial. At our ages, it's a habit, it's normal.
I leave my friends with a strange taste in my mouth. Not from the bittersweet leaf, but from an unresolved question. What should I think of this substance that causes less psychological damage than saturated fats, but which gobbles up the GDP of a country and paralyzes society? I head due south across the mountains topped with villages and carpeted with fields of cat. In Sana'a, I was told about Iman, a young woman who teaches French at Aden University.
I think there's a big difference between life in Sana'a and life in Aden. For young people, especially girls. Before, here in Aden, nobody wore the niqab. Girls didn't wear the niqab, but in Sana'a, since unification, many women in Aden wear the niqab. There are lots of things that aren't from Islam, but people say that is Islam.
Sometimes they lie.
It's not Islam to wear the niqab. There are many things. If I walk with you or with anyone in the street, it's not haram. It's nothing. You're in public. People talk afterwards. It's not haram if I go to a restaurant with my friends.
They always think it's haram.
We mustn't steal, we mustn't tell lies. That's haram. But all the other things are traditions. That's what annoys me here in Aden.
Mais les autres choses, c'est tout ça, c'est tradition. Ça qui m'énerve ici, à Aden.
Iman's smile is full of courage and shows that real faith exists, regardless of the law.